Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and welcome back to their full card breakdown. This time for UFC 298, we have ourselves a beautiful, wonderful, masterful pay-per-view this week, one that is headlined by a very highly anticipated matchup between Alexander Volkanovski and Elliott Topuria, and overall, a really solid pay-per-view that I'm excited to break down for you guys. As always, we'll break down the card from both a DraftKings and a betting perspective. Should be all timestamped down below, so the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and show some love there. It is a card that, truthfully, has a lot of these weirdly lined fights, a lot of fights that I'm not able to call with as much conviction, but nonetheless, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the matchup, break them down accordingly, and hope to try to make some money that way. There will be a video sponsored by CoolBet out later this week, being a UFC Best Bet video. And if you have any questions or concerns, please leave them in the comment section down below. But without further ado, let's do this. We get the fight night started with the 13-8 Andrea Lee taking on the 12-5 Miranda Maverick. And like I mentioned in the opener here, this is a very, very tough card. And a lot of these times you're going to hear me say, this is my pick to win. However, I think this line does not really adequately reflect the way this fight's going to play out. I do think that at the end of the day, gun to my head, I'm going to be picking the younger fighter here, Miranda Maverick. I think she has the ability to go out there, utilize her wrestling to her advantage, utilize her youth, use her athleticism. I think she is an overall good dynamic fighter. She did drop the ball against Dvalishvili, but she has the ability to mix it up on the ground. She has the ability to mix it up with the feet with some decent striking. And going forward is a very, very good offensive fighter. Now, the struggle with me with her is I do think she is a better hammer than she's a nail. When she is put on the back foot, when she is the one taken down, she has her flaws. She is not perfect. She's still young and improving. And I think that the version of Andrea Lee that took on Macy Barber could come out, exemplify that game plan, could cause a lot of problems for Miranda Maverick. But at this point of her career, when Andrea Lee is getting up there in age, when she herself has looked a bit slower in these recent matchup, and who is dropping these fights on the ground, both with takedowns as well as lower volume on the feet, she is someone who I'm not really looking to trust at this point of her career. For that reason, I think Miranda Maverick is able to have some success on the mat, utilize that forward pressure, and at the end of the day, if it comes down to a close decision, I do think they want Maverick to win more of the time. With that being said, though, I don't really want to back Maverick here at chalk just because I think Andrea Lee has fought the better level of competition. If she fights to the best of her ability, could put Maverick on that back foot and could cause some problems. Either way, it is a closer matchup than the line entails, and although I am picking Maverick, it is one where I'm interested to see how Lee plays out, and if this line continues to blow up, maybe I'll look at some split decision props or something like that. DraftKings-wise, though, easy fade for me up top. Maverick, 8.9K, although she does have that takedown upside, we have some phenomenal DraftKings scores this week, and someone who, you know what, is facing one of the better fighters she's ever fought is going to struggle to make it on my lineup. Yes, she does have wrestling upside, but 1 of 4 against a horrible wrestler in Cachoeira isn't going to cut it. When she's facing someone who's her toughest test to date, who's going to put up adversity, I project more so of a 85, 90-point win towards Maverick, which isn't really going to go out there and destroy a Anthony Hernandez or Dvalishvili along with these massive names we have on this card. Instead, I think she's a secondary target, one who could be a good GBP pivot if you have a larger portfolio, but not one who I'm getting single entry. Andrea Lee, for me, is more so a cash play. She doesn't have that same ceiling. I don't think she has wrestling upside. I don't think she has KO upside. She has split decision victory upside. I think she wins a lot more often than people around her, but in saying so, it doesn't have the most ceiling to reflect that and isn't someone I'm looking to play in the GBP formats. Overall, this first fight is more of a DraftKings fade, and I do think although the line should be a little bit closer, I am picking Maverick in this spot here. I didn't turn my hat backwards. I wasn't fully dialed in yet. We are now 7-1 Val Woodburn, 9-2 Oban Elliott. I do think this would be a very, very fun matchup. One between two guys who I do think are lower level, but who are going to deliver when it comes to entertainment. Val Woodburn made his debut against Bo Nickel when, as you'd expect it to, when your opponent's really like a minus 3,000 favorite over you, he got starched. And going from Bo Nickel to Oban Elliott's definitely a step in the right direction for someone like Val Woodburn, who I do think has a decent fundamental skill set. Oban Elliott made his debut in Day 1 Contender Series against Kai Brito. I picked Brito. I think I bet Brito. I'm not the biggest Oban Elliott fan, and I do think that fight could have been stopped in Brito's favor, maybe changing the course of history in the process, because I don't know if necessarily Oban Elliott is the best fighter to make it to the UFC. With that being said, he has grit, he has determination, and he is a very good forward pressure wrestler. He is a Dvalishvili off wish, really, because he's going to go forward, he's going to wrestle, doesn't have the best striking, is very, very hittable, but will continue to push some pace. Now, his cardio is not always there. Like I mentioned, he can be hit and his durability is in question. And on the feet, he's really just looking to set up those takedowns. With all that being said, I do think he's fought a better level of competition than Val Woodburn, and I do think he is going to have a takedown path to victory in the spot here. Gun to my head, I am thinking I'm going to slide with Oban Elliott. I've seen him tested more often. I do think he can go out there and wrestle, but I'd more so line this fight like minus 140 for Elliott, minus 150. Like, there is a lot of value here in the Val Woodburn sign here, and I might be tempted to play it. I am very close to betting Val Woodburn this week. It's not always the prettiest thing, especially because he's coming down in weight. We haven't really seen him tested. He's fought a very low level of competition, but considering the way that Oban Elliott not only is able to be hit, but how his whole path to victory is rooted in just this continued takedown success, Val Woodburn's gonna have the opportunity to land, and he's a very powerful individual. He's a very stocky guy, so I don't necessarily know how easy these takedowns are gonna come. And I do think that I've seen Val Woodburn go to decision, whereas Elliott, I've seen the struggle in those later rounds. I do think that her path to victory for Val Woodburn. And although Gunn might end up picking Elliott here, I might end up with a bet on Woodburn. I do think he wins more than the line entails. DraftKings-wise, very fun fight to target because Elliott, 9.3K, like I mentioned, has that continued takedown success. He has great upside. I think he goes overlooked compared to the higher wrestlers on the slate, but a guy who can go out there, land 4, 5, 6 takedowns, and no one will be surprised because that's his path to victory. He does have finish upside too against a relatively untested Woodburn, and I do think he is a competent GPP play up top. Val Woodburn down low though, 6.9K. He's facing a guy whose chin's always up in the air, who has been chin checked before, whose cardio's not there. He is the punt play this week. He is that underdog, and he is someone who I'm looking to roster. He's a guy who I do think has round one equity. He's a guy who I do think wins more than the price tag entails. So at 6.9K, I'm sprinkling in there because I do think if he wins, he's putting up 100 points in the process. I love his upside, more of a GPP play. Again, very risky because that low level of competition and the grappler across from him is scary, really. But a guy here in Woodburn who I do think wins this fight more than the line entails and who could look very good in doing so. Give me the underdog on DraftKings as a high upside play. Next up, the 6-1 Josh Quinlan, 7-0 Danny Barlow, and just like the previous spot, I'm really close picking the dog here. I think it is a very, very close fight. Both these guys could look like hindsight massive favorites. At the end of the day, I don't think either guy should be touted as high as he is here. Barlow is the favorite. He got his victory, getting a good win on DailyFanMMA Contender Series. I bet against him there. And it's purely because although he is an extremely powerful, precise striker, he's limited to one weapon, which is his left hand. Left-handed god, sick nickname, sick striking, but just started fighting recently, very low level of competition, grappling is extremely suspect. And if someone can learn to, avoid the left hook, really just put up a blockade to that side, his weapons aren't really as versatile. Josh Quinlan, though, we just saw him take his first loss. He struggles against range, and he is a guy who, although has a better fundamental skill set, he's more well-rounded, he doesn't really have the ability to close that distance or close that range. And I think when I look at this from a macro perspective, although Josh Quinlan could look like a hindsight minus 300 with grappling success by closing the distance and taking away that left hand from Barlow, if he can't close the range, it's his Barlow's fight. Because Barlow has a good ability to keep people at range. He has a piston of a left hand, and he's a guy who is going to have the reach advantage in this spot. So I'm very, very tempted. I do like to go with my grapplers, and I think I actually might take Josh Quinlan in this spot just because I've seen so many flaws on the Barlow side. If I'm willing to fade him with an inferior fighter in DailyFanMMA Contender Series, might as well do the same thing here with a guy who can at least compete at the UFC level here in Quinlan. Now, I'd be surprised if Barlow goes out there, keeps Quinlan at range, and finds a finish with that left-handed god power. Not at all. I mean, I'm fully aware of the striking prowess and power that Barlow has here, but at the end of the day, if Quinlan wrestles, if he has success, he could look like a hindsight massive favorite. If he can close that range, he could look like a live underdog. I'll have my eye on his money line this week. I think I'm going to pick him to win here. However, I do think it's a very, very close fight, and for that regard, I'm going to have both sides on DraftKings. 8.7 for Barlow, like I said, would not be surprised in an early KO. That could score well with knockdown upside, with volume and finish upside, really. Whereas, like I mentioned, Quinlan, 7.5K. If he wins, it's rooted in takedown success. It's rooted in going out there and closing the distance, and he could score very, very well in the process. He himself, shown the ability to mix it up on the mat, has good power in his hands, and I do think it's a very, very live underdog at 7.5K. Again, risky. Way more riskier than a girl like Andrea Lee, but someone with a lot more upside who has the potential to go out there and break slates in a victory. And I do think is a guy I'm going to be rostering as well in GPP formats. Next up is the 16-6 Minyoung Zhang versus the 15-5 Brenson Ribeiro, and this is like the main event, right? This is the big fight here, 205 bangers, and this is going to be a fun one, purely because both these guys have no regard for their own safety. Both these guys are killer to be killed fighters with a ton of flaws. I mean, Minyoung Zhang, the big thing you're going to hear all week is this guy lost to Askar Mozarov. The biggest fraud in the UFC beat this guy. And I know it's a bad look, but when you look at this guy's style, when you look at him on tape, you realize how that is a possibility, right? Mozarov, although a horrible grappler and a horrible minute winner, has one weapon, and that's first round power. He caught Zhang with it in a fight that Zhang was winning. Overall, Zhang is a guy who looks to melt you with pressure, is an awesome offensive fighter. He's going to go forward at all costs. He's going to swing heavy, and he's going to look to finish this fight. He will look to take your head off. He will go forward with incredible striking power and size. The guy's a big dude. Go out there and do so. Ribeiro is a guy who I'm not the biggest fan of. He himself is a very, very violent finisher. 100% finish rate, has never seen the third round. You kind of like to see that as a fan, but a guy who is very flawed defensively. He himself has been knocked out in that first round a couple times. We've seen him dropped. His chin's definitely a liability, but he is a good offensive prospect. I mean, he has the skills on the ground. Shall it go there? He has decent hands. And you know what? The guy does have power. But what we have here is we have two guys who are completely offensively minded, who don't really care about their defensive skills at all. It's going to be a battle of who survives and who is still standing to get their hand raised. For that reason, I'm going to go with Minyang Zhang here. He has at least shown a decent ability to take a punch, although they both have horrible defensive skills. Ribeiro, I've seen flatline. Zhang, I've seen flatline too, but he can at least absorb some damage. I do think Zhang's also going to have the forward pressure in this matchup, as well as be the larger fighter of the two, and I do think he goes out there and melts Ribeiro and looks good doing so. We'll be fading Zhang in the future, I promise you that, but I think this in the spot here, I do think Ribeiro's a fraud, and I do think Zhang's got the ability to take advantage of that. I'll probably be betting Zhang, which is a terrible concept to think about. DraftKings-wise, though, with all this round on upside, with the fact that these guys are both finishers, this is a fight you want to see. If Minyang wins here, is going to score incredibly well at 8.4K, considering Ribeiro loses in that first round all the time. The power, the striking is going to be there for Zhang. Whereas if Ribeiro wins, 100% finish rate, always in round 1 or 2, he himself is going to score great at 7.8. I'm not saying Ribeiro can't. I'm just predicting Minyang to do it more often, and for that reason, I will be taking him here. However, I will have both sides on DraftKings. Next up, 8-0 Nakamura versus the 11-3 Carlos Vera. Not much to say here. Vera's taking this on short notice. He himself is a 36-year-old prospect who there's not much to write home about. Nakamura, on the flip side of things, man, he is looking like one of the top prospects at 135. Under 23 world champion. Incredible wrestler. He's translated that very well with his good power and minute-winning ability on the feet as well. And I really do think Nakamura here is the real deal. He is an absolute killer. I'm looking forward to see him do well in the UFC. Now, he's getting a short notice replacement here, and he's a minus 1300 favorite. This is going to be a short breakdown because of that. I do think Nakamura has him covered everywhere. We've seen Vera outstruck on the feet. Now, though he's super durable, this is going to be a matchup where Nakamura has a speed advantage and a power advantage. On the mat, Nakamura is a world-class wrestler and has the ability to go out there, take him down at will. Vera can be taken down. He can give up the back. He has been submitted before. I do think Nakamura finds a finish. Aside from that, what's the path victory for Vera? Well, he has a decent submission game, but I've seen good submission defense from Nakamura. I do think he's able to stay safe. I do think Nakamura wins this fight a lot of the time. No hot take. He's a massive favorite. I do think he gets a finish, though. I'll be betting the submission line. I do think this guy's a real deal, and I'm excited to see him take a step up in the UFC. DraftKings-wise, though, it's all if you can afford him. 9.6K, there are a ton of great scorers this week, and if you can get to him, I would love him, and I would love to play him this week. However, there are some great targets in that mid-range. You know, we're going to talk about that main event. I've already talked about Minyang Zhang. Dvalishvili's there. Barlow, Quinlan are there. Like, there are a ton of mid-range options that make it hard to get to 9.6 sometimes. However, if you have the style to do so, I recommend it. If I was able to convince you on any underdogs, get up to Nakamura. He's the safest floor, as well as a pretty decent ceiling here against Vera. It's just, can he live off to that salary amongst the incredible DraftKings scorers this week? He's more so a safe option. If you want to be different, I do think he's going to be a popular option as well. You're just more so hoping Vera can survive. But give me Nakamura. I do think he's a real deal, and I do think he has another stepping stone towards the top here. Next up, the 21-9-1 Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus the 7-3 Justin Tafa. Heavyweight slop fest, a tough one to break down, but one where I am pretty surprised at the way the market's reacting this one. Justin Tafa is a round 1 power threat. Incredible power on the feet. He is a tied Tuivasa type that he can take your head off, but no ground game. Questionable cardio, and he himself, we've seen him knocked out before. Round 1 power threat. For that reason, phenomenal DraftKings play, but when it comes to an overall better mixed martial artist, I do think de Lima has him covered here. You know, de Lima is a guy who's able to wrestle, a guy we've seen go to decision and win minutes that way, a guy who can strike in his own right, and a guy who, aside from his last one against Derek Lewis, is a pretty tough guy. You add in the fact that he was a massive favorite over Derek Lewis. He was expected to go out there and treat Lewis the same way I expect him to treat Tafa here. I do think this is a spot where I'm going to take de Lima, and I'm going to do so with more confidence than I really should on a 38-year-old heavyweight. With that being said, there's always a chance Tafa can get that round 1 KO. I'm not putting it past him, but most of the time, I think Marcos de Lima is able to use leg kicks to his advantage, and he's able to utilize range from the outside, and he's also able to mix in some takedowns. A lot of attributes that I think win him this fight at a high clip and can score very well in the process. I am going to be betting Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He is one of my more confident plays this week. And although I'm avoiding that round 1 bonk, that is a possibility, I do think de Lima has more tools at getting it done here. DraftKings wise though, another heavyweight fight that you're going to look to target, right? 8.5K, 7.7K. If Tafa wins, round 1 KO equity. 4 wins in the UFC, 4 round 1 KO, scored 104, 103, 103, 104, all of which would probably make the optimal line of a 7.7K. He is a very viable underdog. But I do think Rogerio Lima goes overlooked this week. He hasn't always scored the best, but when he's out there able to use that grappling, scored 120 against Rothwell, 106 against Green, 108 against Arlovsky, 107 against Sassoli. He is a decent scorer, and I do think he's able to get off on that grappling, able to get off on some finish upside here. And I do think he wins this fight more than the line entails at 8.5K. If he's going to come in under-owned, I'd be more than happy to play him here. I do think he has a lot of upside. Next up, the prelim headliner. Honestly, a great fight here. 13-3-1 Amanda Lemos versus the 13-4 Mackenzie Dern. What a scrap. A fun one, but a very binary one, right? You have the absolute power threat, former world title challenger here, Amanda Lemos, who is just going to go out there and look to knock your head off, versus the 13-4 beloved Mackenzie Dern, who is a phenomenal grappling threat. And you know what, after going out there and looking like she shored up her wrestling and striking against Angela Hill, was a huge favorite against Andrade and then dropped the ball. And I think a lot of people are putting a lot of stock in that matchup, but a lot of people are also putting stock in Lemos' last matchup where she was utterly dominated on the mat. It's a simple striker versus grappler matchup, and one where pick your side. I'm not convinced both sides. I think if someone told me a good argument, I could listen to them. I'm truly on the fence. In this matchup here, though, if Mackenzie Dern is able to get her to the mat at all, I think she can sub Lemos. She is a phenomenal grappler. We've seen that every time. She is super, super dangerous on the mat. She can have an advantage. But if Lemos can step those takedowns, there's no doubt that Lemos is the much better striker here. Extremely powerful. Dern blocks punches with their faces, and Andrade showed her why it's a bad idea last time. Lemos is powerful. Although this may hurt a lot of my friends who are Dern fans, Blaine, I'm looking at you. I think I'm going to pick Amanda Lemos here. I think at the end of the day, although her grappling is a huge red flag, she has the physicality advantage here. She has the power, and I think she's the better striker. And although their takedowns might be there for Dern that could end the fight in a moment, so could the power threat. So give me Lemos here. I do think that the more the fight goes, the more it favors Dern, because Dern has showed good cardio and Lemos not so much. But in a close 50-50 fight, let me side with the underdog, who is the more athletic fighter of the two. Give me Lemos, not with much confidence though. Should be a great fight. DraftKings wise though, another one you're going to look to target. This one I think you could go a bit under the field too. 8.3K, it's in the middle range. It should be popular due to the name value. And I do think Dern could have some upside, but if I'm saying Dern's success comes around 2 or 3, indecision wins for Dern. She scored 55-71. Like, those are not great scores. She does have sub 1 equity where she scored 110 against Nunes, 102 against Marcos. That is a possibility. But at the end of the day, it's going to be fresher for Lemos early on, and I do think it's harder for her to go out there. These are all me just really playing devil's advocate. This is still a great fight to target, but amongst a card with so many great fights to target, I may be a bit under-owned considering Dern does have later round equity, and Lemos herself in her wins has had the ability to go out there and, only scored 70 in a round 3 victory over Rodriguez, only scored 83 in round 2 against Waterson Gomez. Doesn't have the same grappling equity. I do think she's more athletic round 1 and has potential to get a round 2 or 1-2 finish, but considering the likes of the people around her, I may be a bit under-owned to this fight than I originally expected. On to this main card now, 11-2 Anthony Hernandez, 12-2 Roman Kopylov. What a fight we have here. One of my most highly anticipated matchups of the week. And I'm siding with Fluffy Hernandez. He's a guy I love to back, one of the best historical DraftKings scorers of all time. He scored 6-8-6 in his last 3 DraftKings fights. The guy is a phenomenal, aggressive grappler who has the ability to go out there and beat people with cardio, beat people with wrestling. And you know what? If you don't knock the guy out, you're going to have a tough guy beating him. The problem is he can be knocked out. He's soft to the body. We've seen him knocked out by a couple of opponents before, and that really is his flaw. Because when it comes down to determination, pace, cardio, and wrestling, he's going to beat you a lot of the time. And I do think he's a match in front of him against Kopylov, who is a very good striker, but a guy who can be taken down, who can be mounted, who can be beaten there. Duraev mounted him. That fight could have been stopped there. He was stopped by Roberson. Hernandez is going to have a huge advantage on the ground, and he's a guy who I'm looking to back for that reason. However, the reason I'm not balls to the wall all in on Anthony Hernandez is because he is a guy who has the ability to be finished, and if anyone's going to finish him here, it's that striking of Kopylov. Diverse attacks, good to the body, good volume and good power. A very, very good striker who has finished his last wins as well. Overall, it's one where I do think the wrestling comes out on top. I love my wrestlers, and I am picking Anthony Hernandez. Although I'm cautious due to that weakness of the body, and I do think if Kopylov wins, it's going to have to be a KO just because of how much better of a minute winner Hernandez is here, especially with that wrestling. DraftKings-wise, though, like I mentioned, Hernandez is one of the best DraftKings scorers ever. We'll talk about Marab in a few seconds here, but 8.8K, his ceiling isn't through the roof. In his last 3 wins, he scored 115, 120, 117, even 134 in the win before that. Great wrestling upside, great pace, great cardio, and a guy you definitely want to target. But like I mentioned, because his weakness is being knocked out, if Kopylov wants to win this fight, it's going to be a KO, and you know what? He's KO'd his last 4 opponents. I do think he's a guy who's also a punt play. I mean, Kopylov, Costa, Neal, Woodburn, those are great punt plays down low. We'll get to them. But another guy with a ton of upside as an underdog, if you do think that, you know what, maybe Hernandez can't really take as much of a beating as we thought we could. As long as this fight's in the feet, Kopylov should have the advantage, but on the mat, it's Hernandez's world, and that pace, that pressure, that cardio leads me to pick him in this matchup here. Next up, 16-4 Merab Dvalishvili, 16-3 Henry Cejudo. What a matchup. You guys know Merab is one of my favorite fighters ever. I've had a ton of money on him. 5 units on him against Marias. I was scared, extremely scared in that matchup. But a guy who I love to back. His pace, his pressure is like no other. Him and Anthony Hernandez are on that pedestal. They're why they're some of my favorite fighters, but a guy with just incredible pace, ability to go out there. He's landed 74 takedowns in the UFC, including performances where he landed 13 against Lopez, 12 against Casey Kenny. Incredible pace, incredible pressure, and that performance against Yan last time, which is mind-blowing. He now faces his toughest opponent, right? He faces a literal world champion, a Olympic wrestler, and he is going to bring to the wrestler a wrestling match, and it makes it for a very interesting matchup. At the end of the day, I do think that the pace, the pressure, the, let's say, consistency and ability to push forward is going to be too much, and I am going to pick Merab in this matchup here. But the way this line goes, I'm extremely tempted on Cejudo because it is going to make for a fun matchup. And although Merab can be an extremely frustrating fighter to watch, he broke Piotr Jan last time. He has great forward pressure, great ability to go and grapple a lot of the time. On the feet, I do think Cejudo is a better striker, and you're going and you're wrestling against a guy who is as touted and as skilled as Cejudo on the mat. If Cejudo is able to get on top, I do think he has better top control, and I do think Merab's a guy who can be put on his back. For that reason, it's going to be very close, and I'm not going out there and parlaying Merab at this price tag. I do think Cejudo makes it a very close one, and I'm tempted to pick him here. But at the end of the day, an older fighter like Cejudo, I do think Merab wants it more, that pace, that pressure, that ability to go out there and really fight at such a high pace can break anybody. I do think he has the ability to do it again here. Now, DraftKings-wise, anytime Merab's name's on the sheet, I'm playing him. 8.6K, one of the best DraftKings scores of all time, averages 118 points, has put up over 145 points 3 times, over 160 points twice. The guy is a phenomenal DraftKings player and a guy who I'll always roster. And this matchup here has a ton of takedown equity as well. Cejudo, I mean, he could be a good pivot as well. He's going to be in a close fight. I do think this fight goes to decision a lot of the time. He himself can land takedowns. He does have more KO equity. And I do think he could be a very good contrarian play to the super popular Dvalishvili up top. But I'm a huge Merab guy. I will be rostering him. Again, anytime he's on the slate, I'm playing him, one of my favorite players. But in a close fight like this, I'll also sprinkle in some Henry at 7.6. If he can get some reversals, if he can get some takedowns of his own right, if he fights at the pace Merab brings, he could be a very, very good low-owned option as well at 7.6. It is an incredible fight. Next up, the 15-5 Jeff Neal, 13-0 Ian Garry. And truth be told, I'm on the fence about this one. I do think it's a lot closer match than the line entails. I do think it's a very interesting one for the power, the forward pressure, and the durability of Neal. But at the end of the day, although I've been flip-flopping, and I was still flip-flopping a few seconds ago, I've decided I'm going with Ian Garry in this matchup. I picked Wonderboy Thompson over Neal. I made some money there, and I do think Garry has the style to stay around the edge from range and poke his way to a decision victory. Good volume, good activity, very accurate striker, and I do think he can win this matchup here. But man, is it going to be hairy. I mean, Jeff Neal is going to continue to walk forward, and if there's one thing you can't have against Jeff Neal, is a questionable chin, because he is extremely powerful, is extremely durable, and he will be in there swinging to the fences to the final bell. And Ian Garry is a guy who's not only a slow starter, but who can be hit, who can be rocked. I mean, he dropped round 1 of Jordan Williams. He got knocked down and dropped round 1 of Kanong Song. The guy can be hit, and I don't want to see the guy against Jeff Neal. And I would not be surprised if Jeff Neal went out there, landed a hellacious blow, and I do think he's able to get the finish if he's able to do so. I mean, he has more finishing ability than Kanong Song does, I'll tell you that. And I do think he's not the guy you want to have your head up high against. And although it is a possibility, although it's a reason why I was tempted on Jeff Neal, at the end of the day, Ian Garry is a guy who is going to be the better volume, better minute winner, and has the ability to pick poke away from the outside en route to a decision. I don't think he finishes Neal, and for that reason, it's tough for me to see him living up to his price tag. I do think that at the price tag we have now here, Jeff Neal's a very interesting underdog. I mean, I might want to play him if it's plus 200, plus 220, because of how durable he is, how he's going to be swinging for the fences, and how we've seen Garry start slow. At the end of the day, I do think Garry has a style to beat Neal, and I will be picking him. DraftKings-wise, though, this is not a fight I'm too interested on the Garry side of things, right? Considering how tough Neal is, considering how Gary's able to pick poke his way to a decision, like I said 3 times already, there are better options. He only scored 85 against Magny decision there, 95 against Green, 62 against Weeks. I do think that on a card with Hernandez, Merab, Nakamura, there are better options, and I do think that Neal's able to survive here, making Garry maybe not the best option at 9.1K. Neal, though, he is one of those punt plays. Val Woodburn, Roman Kopylov, Jeff Neal, phenomenal punt plays. And I do think if he wins, he scores very, very well. Pick is Garry. I do think Neal keeps it close, though. Neal's the better DraftKings target, but I am going to side with you and Garry to get it done here. Should make for a fun matchup. Co-main event time, 24-7 Robert Whittaker, 14-2 Paulo Costa. I'm happy that the fight's actually happening. It should be a very, very fun one, but a very puzzling one, not only as a Whittaker fan, but as a guy breaking down fights as well, because you know what, Whittaker's a guy who's made a career off of beating the bigger fighter, right? Beat Romero a couple times. He's been able to go out there and showcase his versatility against Jared Cannonier as well, and he's a guy who I've loved to back because of it. But he was out there and got bullied by Dricus du Plessis. He got had an arm thrown like that. He got knocked down by a jab, and he got finished by a guy in Dricus du Plessis who I didn't think was up to the standard of Robert Whittaker. I bet Robert Whittaker against him here. Looks stupid doing so. And for that reason, it makes it kind of cautious because you're going up against an insane power threat athlete on the secret juice Paulo Costa fighter that is really going to be dangerous in all areas. At the end of the day, though, I'm picking Whittaker. I do think he can poke his way from the outside, win more minutes. He is the better overall minute winner that way, but I'm scared of the power threat that Costa poses. If Whittaker's chin's really destroyed, Costa's not the guy I want to go up against. I do think he has the ability to go out there and find the chin. That's his path to victory, though. Because if not, Whittaker's going to be like Marvin Vettori, landing head kicks, wondering why Costa's still standing up. But the reason why we knew Costa was so tough is because he was being blasted with everything. I do think Whittaker knew the same thing. I think Whittaker could put on a striking masterclass here against Costa if he's able to survive that big power blow coming back his way. But I do think he wins. He's another option who I'm looking to back here. But a super interesting matchup. I'd much rather watch this one from a fan perspective. DraftKings-wise, though, exact same to the last one. Don't want Whittaker at 9K. He's a guy who has not finished many of his wins recently, has scored 65, 72 in his last 2 3-round decision wins. He's even scored 66 and 88 points in decision wins before. He's not the best overall DraftKings score, not much grappling equity, not much finish upside, and at 9K, there are much better options. But Costa, just like Val Woodburn, Jeff Neal, and Roman Kopylov, is a punt play. If Costa wins, it's going to score very, very well. I kind of like Jeff Neal more than him, but Costa himself has grappling upside. I don't think he utilizes it, but it's there, and power finishing upside. He himself is a great play, punt play on DraftKings. However, the pick is still going to be Robert Whittaker to get it done. And finally, the fight we've been all waiting for, the main event, 26-3 Alexander Volkanovski, 14-0 Elliott Topuria. I've really struggled to how I want to intro this. I kind of got a plan in my mind how I want to break down every fight, but I don't really know. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to levels. And I'm been picking Alexander Volkanovski. I think it's too soon for Elliott Topuria. I think the guy's talented, but I mean, losing fights from range to Bryce Mitchell, being dropped by Jai Herbert, and beating an older fighter in Emmett who doesn't have that same minute-winning capability, to going to face one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, Alexander Volkanovski, is a big jump. And if you had Elliott Topuria plus 200, plus 250, I would look his way because I do think he has skills. But to make him almost the favorite here against one of the best fighters we've ever seen at 145, a guy who has beaten my idol, my favorite UFC fighter 3 times, if you ask me twice, but dominantly the 3rd time for sure. Volkanovski is a guy who's not to be messed with, a guy who can adapt and win fights. One of the smartest fighters we've seen win inside the cage. I mean, he has the ability to mix it up wherever the fight goes, can win minutes in not only the wrestling, but on the striking as well, and has shown the ability to take the step ahead and win fights. I love his IQ, I love his ability to go out there and be gritty, and I love his desire to win, and I do think he has multiple ways he's going to get done. Topuria, a phenomenal boxer, but we've never really seen him face adversity. Volkanovski will be showing him different looks, whether it be leg kicks, in and out movements, a guy who's done his research, and also the ability to mix it up on the ground as well. I do think it's a step too soon for Topuria, and Volkanovski should be a larger favorite here. One of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I'm definitely be backing him at this price tag. I do find it's a bit disrespectful that, although he was just knocked out by Makhachev, that was up a weight class on short notice against literally the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now, and now making almost underdog to a guy who's not fought many guys. I do think it's a tall task, and I am be siding with Volkanovski here. However, I do think it's a really close one. I do think although Volkanovski can grit out a decision here, Topuria is tough. We haven't really seen him dragged into deep waters. I do think Topuria's best chance to victory here is finding the KO. I don't think it's likely. I mean, Volkanovski's been tough, but he was dropped by Makhachev, dropped by Mendez. We have seen Volkanovski hurt before, and Topuria does have that incredible power there. So I'm not writing out Topuria completely, but I'm picking Volkanovski. I do think he wins more time than not. He is a guy I'm looking to back here. DraftKings-wise, though, one of the best fights targeted on the slate. I know I've said that a few times already, but 8K, 8.2, you can get either guy. Volkanovski averages 101.8, and that includes 2 losses as well. A guy who scored 136 against Rodriguez, 114 against Holloway, 132 against Korean Zombie, 135 against Ortega. Like, the guy's a phenomenal DraftKings scorer, and when he wins this fight, if he wins this fight, which I do think he does, is going to score phenomenal in the process at 8.2K. Topuria, though, like I mentioned, his path to victory is probably a KO. It's probably that finish upside, and he himself has scored 126, 100, 100, 112. And the guy's a phenomenal DraftKings scorer in his own right, and I do think that the winner of this fight is going to score phenomenally. Although I've mentioned a ton of great fights, this is one of my favorite fights in the entire slate on DraftKings, and I'm going to be siding with Volkanovski, but due to the upside and potential less ownership, being a less popular fighter, I'm going to be taking Topuria on DraftKings as well. Fight on from both sides. A great one, to say the least. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. And quickly running through my quick picks, taking Alexander Volkanovski, Robert Whittaker, Ian Garry, Merab Dvalishvili, Anthony Hernandez, Amanda Lemos, Marcos Rogério de Lima, Reignmakers Nakamura, Minyang Zhang, Josh Quinlan, Elliott, and Miranda Maverick. I think there's a few fights that I could go either way. Woodburn Elliott could go either way. Quinlan Barlow could get either way. Zhang Ribeiro could either way. And then Lemos Dern go either way. Like, there's a ton of fights that are super close that I am siding with not the most confidence, but I hope my breakdown was able to show you my full read on that fight. DraftKings wise, I've mentioned a ton of guys I'm looking to play, looking to target. Let's break that down. I think fights to target wise, there's a few of them. That main event is the number one. But I also think Minyang versus Ribeiro, two guys who are round one or bust, a ton of power. That's a fight you want to target. Barlow versus Quinlan, I think, is an extremely sneaky fight as well. And then every time you have Merab or Anthony Hernandez on a card, you want to target those fights as well. I think for breaking it down by segment, if you have enough money, get up and get Nakamura. Great floor, great ceiling. I love that guy as well. Elliott, a good pivot play up top, but not getting to as much as Nakamura. And then mid-range, Hernandez, Dvalishvili, great options. That Rogério de Lima fight, I think, is going to be a very... I think a lot of ownership towards Tafa, but for that reason, I like Rogério de Lima even more. Another heavyweight slot fighter that score well. And then underdog-wise, I think Dern has a good chance to win. I think Ribeiro's ceiling super high. Same with Tafa. And then Cejudo, Quinlan, I think in that mid-range could score very well and win as well. I think if they win, they look hindsight huge favorites. And I'm going to have some Quinlan due to that GBP upside. And then it comes down to those four huge punt plays. Kopylov, Costa, Neal, Woodburn. I kind of like Woodburn the most because I do think he goes more overlooked than the other ones and has round one KO upside with potentially less ownership. But all four of them, GBP plays, huge upside. Betting wise, haven't officially locked in anything yet, but I'll be betting Volkanovski, I'll be betting Minyang Zhang, I'll be betting Marcos Rogério de Lima. Maybe not the names you want to hear, but those are the names I'll be locking in for sure. I'll be keeping an eye on the Quinlan line if it keeps going up. Keep an eye on the Woodburn line if it keeps going up. And then props wise, be sure to check out my best bet video out later in the week, sponsored by CoolBet. Or if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. Reignmakers wise, Reignmakers Nakamura up top. Both Hernandez and Dvalishvili, no question. And then the winner of Minyang Zhang, Ribeiro, and the winner of Volkanovski, Topuria. These are good five to get you started. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Hopefully my breakdown was able to give you enough insight into how I'm targeting this card myself and able to help you in your DraftKings and betting endeavors. I wish everyone the best of luck. Please like button down below, subscribe to the channel, show some love. If you have any questions, also leave in the comment section down below. I wish everyone all the best of luck this weekend. Let's make some money, guys.